God, everyone's moving away from you. Are you okay?
I just want to be with my friends. See, now I feel abandoned. Just bring this on release. Ah.
Recommence with your evidence officer. There was one matter that had not been finalised yesterday in relation to reinterpretation of ruling number 3. In relation to those orders, reasons will be published on the website today. And basically, just in short form, I'm persuaded that there is a proper basis for a non-publication order in the case of the author of one text message until the conclusion of that author's evidence. And at the conclusion of that author's evidence, I will consider whether there are grounds to extend the order. However, although I have not received an application for an extension of the order from Sergeants Bowens or Kirkby, given the obligatory terms of Section 43 of the Act, I've nevertheless considered whether I'm obliged to make a further order in their cases, and ultimately I'm not persuaded that there is a proper foundation for such an order. So on the website today, there will be a redacted version consistent with that ruling of the reasons, and there will also be a new short minutes of order in relation to the current non-publication orders. Dr. Dwyer.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, I note that First Class Constable Ebel continues his evidence today, and just before we start again, I just note also that Mr Suttner is on the phone again and that he appears with Miss McNally for Sergeant Bowens in this matter.
And obviously you're on that same promise to tell the truth. Yes. Who would like to go next? Ms. Wild? Or? Yes. Yes.
Officer Ebel, my name's Wild. I'm a lawyer at Kumanjayi. I'm going to try not to be repetitive because I know we've been under a lot of the evidence. And in saying that, the first thing I'm going to take to is that piece of evidence that we have gone over a lot, which is the interaction we've had with community member. Now she asked you about Coronial's rifle and says it's not right. And you say to her that someone couldn't run at police with an axe. Now Proctor says of this, that it is at page 136. This comment is suggested as of a retaliatory policing response to the events that occurred that preceding Wednesday. And Superintendent Knowlton gave evidence of the same comment, said that it's extremely disappointing, provocative in nature, and wouldn't serve to address the first element of my plan, which was community reassurance and inherent in that respect. Yesterday, you said a words to the effect that what you meant in saying that is that if a community acts in a certain way, then the community can expect extra police to attend. So whilst perhaps your comments to Ms. Snape were harsh, you stand by them. Is that right?
As I said yesterday, on hindsight, I probably shouldn't have said what I said. And like yesterday, I apologise for saying that. So they asked the reason why I said it initially, and I stated that yesterday. So in hindsight, obviously I wouldn't say those comments. So just to say that I stand by them is probably incorrect.
I see. So you're explaining why you said them at the time,
Correct.
rather than standing by them.
Correct.
At the time, you wanted her to know that it would be a different response than a normal community police response. Is that right? Would you agree with that?
I just said more, please. I think that was my remark.
At the
Yep.
committal, you were asked why you said it, and you said potentially a different response than a normal community police.
Okay.
So you were alerting her that it was going to be different to a normal community police response.
Okay, if that's what I said. Okay. Yep.
What you were saying to her was that if a member of her community acts in a certain way, then they should expect a heightened police presence with its weaponry, regardless of whether children are around. Is that what you're saying to her?
That's not what I said, no.
He said he didn't say community, if community behaves in a certain way, it was if somebody takes police with an act. Was not directed towards the community, it was directed towards an individual.
Yesterday, what you said was that if you meant that if a community acts in a certain way, then you can expect extra police to attend. That's what you said yesterday?
That's what I said, yeah.
So transcript 178. In your second statement to police, when again you're asked about the axe incident, you said that Ms. Snape smirked. I'll give you the direct quote. It's page 45 of your statement taken by police on the 13th of November. He said, I remember when I said to her about that someone shouldn't run at police with an axe, as why he might have that. She had a bit of a smirk on her face that I noticed. So I think she knew about that.
That's correct.
So it was your view that she smirked when you talked about the axe incident,
Correct.
as though she knew about it.
Correct.
And it didn't make her smile, but smirk, that was a particular use of word that you used. And it made you think that she was in on it, in effect. Is that right?
I don't know about in on it, but she knew what I was referring to.
And that made her smirk.
Yes.
This is the lady with the crying baby on her hip who's telling you off about the gun. So you still believe she knew about the axe incident?
I was referring to the smirk that she made in reference to it seemed like she knew what I was talking about.
And it suggests that she's somehow complicit in it. Would you agree with that?
you'd have to ask her that comment to see what she meant. You know what she meant by that reaction to my comment.
Okay, well, your impression of her smirk
Yep.
was that she knew about the axe incident and she found it somehow amusing.
I don't know whether she found it amusing, but that was her response.
You said she smirked.
Yes,
Well, you talked about the axe incident.
correct.
To you, it suggested she was somehow complicit, correct?
I said that referred to she knew what I was referring to. Yeah. Whether she found it amusing or not.
Now, in this exchange, you're not treating her as an innocent civilian, are you?
I was just referring to her, to speaking to her. What do you mean by innocent civilian?
Well, you've talked to her in a way that suggests, well, what Proctor says is suggestive of a retaliatory policing response. That Nobbs says wouldn't serve to address the first element of his plan, which was community reassurance. You have said even yesterday that what you meant that if a community acts in a certain way, they can expect police to attend. Now, you are not treating her as if she is an innocent civilian, but rather that she is part of the community that has a member that's going at police with an axe.
I wouldn't use those terms as a reference. I was just speaking to her.
And you think she knew about the axe incident?
From the reference to the smirk. Yeah.
You would have to agree that by this stage you are not acting as a community police officer, correct?
I wasn't working from that community, so I was from Alice Springs. Yeah.
But instead you've adopted an us and them mentality, a police versus a community.
Not at all. I was there to do a job to find Kumanjayi and arrest him. That was my purpose.
You didn't know this lady, is that right?
No.
Would it surprise you to learn that she's not even from Kumanjayi?
No, it wouldn't surprise me. A lot of the community members are quite transient.
There's no evidence whatsoever that she even knows Kumanjayi?
Not from my knowledge, no.
You assume she knew about the axe incident,
From a reaction to my comment, yes.
and it wouldn't surprise you to learn that she was in fact visiting from another community to attend the funeral.
Wouldn't surprise me, no.
And yet you still think she knew about the axe incident.
It's already explained that.
Explain.
Yeah. Constable Ebel, you're not ex-army,
Nope.
and you're all, at the time, was your youth engagement officer in Alice Springs.
Correct.
And in that role, you were able to have a really positive impact on the kids that you were working with.
Correct.
Now, officers Kirstenfeld and Roth did used to be in the militia, is that right?
I believe so.
And you've said in evidence yesterday that you undertook regular training sessions.
Well, regular once every roster period, which is a 5-week period, but you weren't always able to make it within that time, so.
But you were often able to make it because you had
Correct.
steady roster.
Correct.
And sometimes Kirstenfeld and Rolf and other ex-Defence Force IRT members would be at those training sessions, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
and you would, and if any of those members had a skill set that they were able to pass on to the other members, then that was encouraged. Would you agree with that?
It was helpful, yes.
Yes. And in fact, Lee Goins has said that, for example, if the Army boys had anything to offer, it was introduced into the training sessions.
Yeah, as long as it stayed within the confines of police duties and what was training within the police.
Now, Constable Ebel, I'm going to take you to a bit of theory on policing. So, and I'm not sure what is taught in the academy, so you'll have to pull me up. But this, I've got this from page 135 of the Proctor report, which is that the policing in Australia finds its foundation in the policing principles established by Sir Robert Peel in 1829. Do you know about all of this? Is this taught in policing?
This is probably going to be above my head, but I'll do my best to try and comprehend what you're talking about.
The Peelian principles, so says Proctor, have a strong focus on policing by consent. And that is respecting community principles and obtaining the support and trust of the community. They also have a strong focus around the use of force by police and the use only of the minimum force necessary for achieving a police objective. That's consistent with your learnings in the police force, is that right?
Yeah.
And the theory of policing is that it's based on contract with its community members that the police serve and protect, in effect. And in doing so, use the minimum force. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, these principles of policing can be at odds with military engagement. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I don't really know a lot about it. As I said, I'm not from the military, so I don't know the rules of engagement within the military, I'm afraid.
Okay. You said yesterday of your gun that it's better to have it and not need it rather than to need it and not have it.
That's right.
But that's an oversimplification, is it not?
That's not just with that, that's with other accoutrements as well. Yeah. Other items that you might have.
Okay, but you'd agree that if you have it, you're more likely to use it.
Well, if you don't have it, you can't, can you?
Yes. But it may be that you have more ready access to that weaponry when otherwise you would have used different tools to achieve the same result. Would you agree with that?
Not entirely, no, I don't agree with that.
Could you expand on that?
Sure. In the circumstance of, let's talk about the circumstance of what had occurred, the terrible, situation that happened. If there wasn't a firearm or something used, for example, and we didn't gain subject control by immediate incapacitation, for example, then that person might continue to use that weapon, and so we might have had a different result where it could have went the other way, for example.
Okay.
So you can't have the same result if you don't have the same items. For example, if you're using spray, OC spray, if you don't have that, then you're not going to get the same result because you don't have that particular item.
But less lethal weaponry certainly can be deployed to stabilise someone.
Yeah, definitely.
And you have a black belt in martial arts.
No, I don't.
Don't you? Tell us what about your martial arts.
I've done a few different martial arts, but yeah.
I misunderstood.
That's all right.
I'm now going to take you to you watching the footage of the events of the 6th of November.
At the Alice Springs Police Station.
Yes.
Okay.
But what you're watching. So you were surprised that the members then didn't draw their firearms, that's right?
Correct.
And you were critical of them.
Critical, how so?
Well, you said it was criticising what the members were doing, is what you said, around operational safety, what the members were thinking, why were they standing there with their hands up, why weren't they taking action, they weren't. Yep, basically it was criticising what the members were doing.
Where are you reading from?
That is the, I now don't have a note. I think it's the second statement, and I'll have to pull up the reference from my solicitor, and I'll give.
That's okay.
Do you remember saying that?
No.
Are you saying you were critical of them?
We look at a situation, and like I said, I was surprised they didn't use their firearm because of the training we receive in certain circumstances. Until you're in that circumstance as an individual, you haven't got emotions in play, etc. So you can't really. You're not going to discredit someone for what they did, but you can question in relation to, why did they do this? Why did they do that? From that point, but you're not in that point, so you're not emotionally compromised potentially. So.
Now, with the view of Chris Hand that no one was injured, and that's the best result in my view. That's what Officer Hand's takeaway from that failed arrest attempt was. Now that you've had a really good opportunity to be based in Alpara as a community police officer.
I'm not there anymore, but.
Yeah, you've had the opportunity though.
Yeah.
Do you understand that sentiment of Officer Hand?
That you're glad no one was injured.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not necessarily just in community. That's across anywhere. That's what we want to achieve every day we go to work. We don't want anyone to be injured.
But he said that's the best result in my view.
That's not a bad result. Yeah, sure, definitely.
But for you, your priority was ensuring this. On the 9th of November, was ensuring that Kumanjayi didn't get away so that he could be brought before a court. Right?
That's our job to do, yes, as police, yep.
And you agree that that's best achieved by the minimum use of force?
It's always best to avoid confrontation before you use any force. But in that circumstance, if you have to use force, then the minimum is best.
Prior to going in, you assessed a number of things, the first of which was that Kumanjayi Walker was a target that may respond with threats of violence to police. And the second is that he might run away. Is that right?
These are alerts on,
Yes.
and this was put on after that incident on the 6th.
Yep. So that was in your mind, though, before you went in?
I don't think it would have been.
That Kumanjayi may respond with threats of violence to police, and that he might run away.
That's a common alert that a lot of people have that we deal with from day to day, that they may respond with threats of violence to assist in their escape, or they may assault police. That's a common alert on a lot of people. So it's not like the out of the ordinary.
Yeah. You had plans for the second issue, which is that he might run away, in that you had a police dog and a degree of cordoning around the building. Is that right?
Yes.
You also had plans or contingencies for the use of force or threats by Kumanjayi, in that you were armed. Is that right?
By our accoutrement belt, yeah.
What you didn't plan for was how to prevent the need to use force against Kumanjayi Walker. You had no contingencies to prevent him from reacting to police. Is such that he may need to use force against him. Would you agree with that?
Just thinking, because it certainly wasn't a contingency to be able to not use, you know, any force whatsoever.
What you had to plan for was how to minimise the use of force necessary to effect the arrest.
If you were going to use force,
If you had to use force,
yeah.
you hadn't.
We always start at the lower end, like in a particular circumstance. So, if someone was presenting, you know, unarmed, you know, you would say you're under arrest. If they start struggling, you would use, you know, empty hand tactics in what you get taught. Yeah. If they're presented with a weapon, you may use a different accoutrement. So you're not going to go empty hand tactics. You know, you're going to communicate. But if that doesn't work, then you're going to have to use particular accoutrement because of the level of force that they're using. You know, we need to be able to overcome that level of force that they're using.
But there were no plans with your fellow officers as to how to minimise the use of force necessary in effecting an arrest.
No, like plan on a piece of paper. I think you make a plan as you go, like it's fluid in the moment. So you don't write down, oh, you know, we're going to do this. If he does this, we're going to do this. It's not like that.
It wasn't just that there was no plan on a piece of paper, there was no plan at all as to that, was there?
Like I said, we're fluid. We move in the moment.
So no.
There was no written plan, no.
You would agree that this has been a divisive matter in the community and within police?
This incident?
Yeah.
Yes?
And we have seen that, we've seen the that campaign, the blue handprints across all the Facebook sites.
No, I don't know about that.
You don't know about that?
No. I don't go on Facebook and that, so.
Well, I suggest it's more than just a hashtag. There's t-shirts. It's not just on social media. You're not aware of all of the t-shirts that have been printed and so on.
Not about these blue hands or anything, no?
Or the IBAC Zach t-shirts. No?
No?
There's certainly been strong support from the Police Association. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Lots of police came to trial for your evidence. Is that right?
There was a few police there, yep.
Did you feel supported by that presence or pressured by?
By the police members.
Yes, that all came to attend your evidence in the trial.
The few that were there, no, I didn't feel pressure. It was support.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
You want to turn this Edwards on?
You go next.
Sorry, I've got that. Sorry. I'm not ready.
He's welcome to go next.
No.
Mr. McMahon? Could I just
I'm just getting some messages back that the audio is quite soft this morning. I just asked Mr. McMahon if he wouldn't mind keeping his voice up.
And if need be...
Do I need to speak up?
No, I think you're okay. If need be, just take a seat. It's easier to be closer to the microphone. I'm just not sure, but see how you go.
Let's see how we go.
Yeah.
Constable, my name's McMahon and I act for the Foreign Group Committee of Yuendamu, which is essentially a justice committee of people from Yuendamu. And we're generally looking more at systemic issues than specific issues, and the issue I want to discuss with you given that you're a weapons instructor, you are a weapons instructor, aren't you?
Correct.
Is the AR-15, the Armalite 15. For people not familiar with that, it's very similar to the M16 used, is that correct? The M16 rifle?
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your interview, the M16 is the rifle used by the Australian and American armies in previous wars in our region, correct?
Correct.
In your interview of the 13th of November, you were talking about IRT training and things like that. 13th of November 2019. And you were talking about this particular weapon, and you said that it's your primary weapon in the IRT is the AR-15.
So if you're carrying that is M4 or AR-15, it's the same kind of, or M16. It's all very similar weapon system. There's a couple of little minor differences, but if you have possession of that, then and you have a Glock pistol, then that becomes your primary weapon. If you don't have the AR-15, we'll just say the AR-15, then your Glock in a firearms incident, that would be your primary weapon. So whatever, the rifle overrides the Glock.
So the most lethal weapon in your hands is the primary weapon, whatever that might be. Well, if you're holding a rifle, you're not going to put the rifle down to pull out a Glock, eh? So
No.
The one that you're holding is your primary weapon, or the one that you can first access is your primary weapon?
I'm so sorry to interrupt my learned friend. We're just getting a message that it's difficult to hear him. I'm wondering if you might sit down, Mr. McMahon, or if that's going to be too difficult. It's just the distance from the microphone is a problem, I think.
I'll just lean in. I'm just going to lean in. No, I've got my things here. I'm just going to lean in an intimidatory fashion to take control. Okay, so you've explained what a primary weapon is. So it's not necessarily accurate as I understood it, so this is my mistake, to say that the primary weapon of the IRT is the AR-15. That's not an accurate understanding by me.
Depends on what weapon you have in possession. So
Right, I understand now. On the day in question, the 9th of November, you were carrying a Glock, correct?
On the 9th of on my hip, correct?
9th of November 2019.
Not for the whole time, but through the incident, yes.
When you say not for the whole time, what are you thinking of?
No, after the incident, I was in possession of AR-15 as well.
All right. Just quickly tell us when we're using the AR-15 after the incident.
Yeah, so when we drove to the airport and when I was patrolling around the back of the police station within the confines of the compound.
Is that patrolling with Constable Hawkins?
Yeah, in the rear of the police. Yeah, correct.
So when you were at the house 577 and 511, those houses, you had a Glock with you, correct?
Correct.
And magazine in the Glock?
Correct.
How many rounds in the magazine?
In my magazine, I think there was 14. It holds 15.
And did you have one round in the chamber?
Correct. It's an action condition. All of our weapons, when we carry them, in action condition.
Ready to shoot. Is that what you mean?
Ready to use if we need to.
Yeah. Well,
Because if it's not action, you have to rack the slide for it to chamber around.
Yep. And you have a safety on?
There is no safety.
So you're holding
Well, there is a drop safety, a firing pin safety, and there's a bit of a trigger safety, but not like an ambidextrous safety, thumb safety, as they would use in, say, South Australian Police, for example.
So just for the benefit of people who don't use firearms much That second kind of safety means you have to use your thumb and move like a switch, like a light switch or some other kind of switch.
Yeah, that's correct. But
And if you pull the trigger on a rifle or a pistol and the safety's on, nothing happens.
correct.
But if you take the safety off, then it's a live weapon and can immediately discharge.
Yeah, you go from action condition to an instant. That's the condition.
Yeah. And the Glock that you use, is it a Glock 17?
No, it's a Glock 22.
Okay. That doesn't have a safety,
Not an external safety, no.
not requiring a separate safety move by you.
No.
Okay. So it can be used very quickly if you need to.
Yes.
So you've got a magazine with 14 rounds in. Are you carrying other magazines
Yes.
at the time? How many magazines?
Including the one in the gun or separate? Including the one in the gun, 3.
So 45 rounds altogether. Yeah. Yesterday you were asked some questions about a Glock and you said at T1828, most shootings in relation to an engagement are up to about 4 metres. So I just want to make sure I understand that. We're talking about a Glock at the moment.
Correct. Yeah.
When you say most shootings in an engagement, you mean that in a situation where a police officer has to use a gun and fire a round, that typically happens within a range of about 4 metres. Is that what you were saying?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. And pretty much any trained police officer would be able to hit a target with a Glock in a 4 metre range. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
And even if you were uncertain about that, you'd be confident that any IRT trained officer using a Glock should be able to hit a target within 4 metres.
Correct.
It's clear that you took your AR-15 from Alice Springs to Yuendamu.
Correct.
Yeah. How many rounds in a magazine for an AR-15?
It holds maximum capacity is 30, but you can't run it at 30. It won't lock into the gun, so you run maybe 28 in the magazine.
28 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber? Or 28 altogether?
Yeah, so if you're taking the weapon out, then you would action the weapon, but generally, yeah, so 28 in the magazine, you'd have a spare magazine, for example, so, yeah.
Well, how many magazines did you take out for your AR-15 on the 9th of November?
I don't remember. I would have maybe had a spare magazine.
There's a reference somewhere in the materials, maybe more than one reference, about talking about 2 AR-15 magazines. So you take only 1 spare AR-15 magazine. Is that your standard practice?
I would say, yeah.
So you have
Unless I had a vest, then I'd maybe have a couple more, but yeah, I can't remember.
Okay, so you've got a bit under 60 AR-15 rounds and about 45 Glock rounds. Okay. And just so people understand what an AR-15 can do, it can kill somebody at about 500 metres. You'd agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, you're sounding uncertain. I'm not talking about how good a shot you are. I'm talking about if you manage to hit the target, it can kill at 500 metres.
Yeah, even probably further than that.
Okay, what would you say? How far?
Well, I wouldn't know the specific, but I reckon it would be above 500 if you, yeah.
All right. And these AR-15s, they're semi-automatics, is that right?
Correct.
And just for the benefit of people unfamiliar, an automatic rifle or a machine gun, if you hold the trigger and keep it held, all the rounds come up through the magazine and go out through the barrel.
That's correct.
So you can shoot 30 or 60 rounds, depending on the weapon, 30 or 60 rounds in, say...
Less than 10 seconds.
Yeah. But the AR-15s are semi-automatic?
Correct. Just like the Glock.
And would you agree that a semi-automatic the AR-15 semi-automatic can shoot, if the shooter is trained well enough, approximately 45 rounds in a minute?
Yeah, that'd be achievable, yeah.
That's as a trainer, you would say that's achievable. And especially if you're training policemen who are not your average punter, but someone who's focused on elite training.
Yes.
And the velocity of a round from an AR-15 or an Armalite is about 1 kilometre a second. You agree with that? Well, take it from me, that is
Okay,
the velocity.
I'll take it from you.
1 kilometre a second. But even if you don't know the exact specifications, that's about right, do you understand?
Probably something like that.
Yeah. All right. Now, with regard to what you did on that day and the AR-15, you've taken the AR-15 to Yuendamu.
Correct.
And can you just clarify why you did that?
To have it there in case we needed it, like if the become like a high risk situation, for example, and we needed to raise the level depending on the situation. That way I had it there rather than, because I don't have anything like that out there. They just have the standard weapons for a remote station, like a 308 22, which was for small and large animal destruction, and they would have a pump action shotgun for the tactical purposes.
For what?
Tactical purposes.
Tactical against human beings.
Correct.
Pump action shotgun.
Correct.
12 gauge.
Yes.
And by pump action you mean you can shoot quite a lot of rounds quickly.
It's not as fast as a AR-15 or a Glock, but you can, yeah. But it's limited with the amount of rounds. It's only four in the magazine tube and.
Oh, that wasn't clear to me. 4 in the magazine. And
Tube, yeah. It's got a magazine tube, so capacity is 4, and then you could put 1 in the chamber, so 5. Yeah.
Okay. And pump action 12 gauge shotgun. For instance, if you fired it at me from where you are, I would be absolutely dead for sure. Assuming you were a good shot.
Potentially, yeah.
Well, not potentially. I mean, there's
Well,
no way
depends.
I'd live at this distance with a 12 gauge pump action.
Well, I've never used it on a person, so I
its
would.
capabilities, don't you?
It probably wouldn't be good, no.
No. And so they're sitting out at Yuendamu. So they've got that there. You said a 22, just to explain to people, a 22 is a rifle with a relatively smaller round than the other weapons we've been talking about. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, it's a smaller round than the AR-15.
Yeah,
The AR-15 uses a 5.56mm round,
correct,
NATO round, much bigger than a 22 round,
correct,
and capable of causing much more damage.
correct.
For instance, if you shot me now at this distance with an AR-15, it would probably go straight through me and kill 1 or 2 other people if they were lined up behind me. Correct? Well, if it went through the flesh.
But yeah, well, if it went through the flesh, it depends if on the projectile you're using, whether it's hollow point or not.
Yeah. Well, what do you use in IRT? What sort of projectiles?
I haven't been in there for like 3 years, so I'd have to go have a look. But I think there might be hollow points.
Yeah,
I
which are more-
can't confirm.
Hollow points are more lethal than other rounds, aren't they?
The greater stopping power, but
What
they
do you
don't
mean by
have,
greater stopping power?
because they open up, they expand,
Yeah.
but they don't have the penetration like a full metal jacket like the military use, for example.
So by greater stopping power, you mean that if you shot someone with an AR-15 point round, when it entered the body, the round opens up and creates a very large cavity as the bullet exits from the body at the back.
If it exits, yes.
If it exits at all. Yeah. Okay. So you said that Yuendamu Station had other weapons, and that's they weren't good enough for your purposes. That's why you need to take the AR-15. Just want to focus on what's at Yuendamu. There's the 22
I
rifles.
don't think he said they weren't good enough. I don't think he gave that.
Well, what did you mean when you said?
No. So the 22 is used for small animal destruction because we use firearms to protect life and also to lawfully destroy animals. So
no police force would use a 22 rifle in dangerous situations and no army, correct?
you're correct. You wouldn't use it, in a.
But the 308, can you just explain
So
what that is?
So that's a larger caliber rifle. It's a bolt action rifle, just like the 22 we use. It's a Remington 700 rifle we use, and that's for large animal destruction. So cattle, camel, horses, that sort of stuff.
And
So
just to show people, the round is what, 6 centimeters long?
something like that. Yeah.
And it's a heavy round. When you hold it, it's heavy and weighty and feels and it's a very...
Yeah, I think the projectiles are either 165, 180 grain. Yeah.
And obviously enough, if it can kill a wild animal like a wild bull or camel or something, can certainly destroy a human being.
Yeah, but we don't use that rifle for tactical purposes. Not the bush station rifles and things like that.
No. Well, it's not much use for tactical purposes, is it? Because it's bolt action, you have to keep using the bolts to load each round in the chamber, right? It takes too long to do it.
Well, I think some police forces use it for within their sniper. They have the
Single shot, long distance.
correct. Yeah.
But that's not what you guys are up to, is it? You're out at Yuendamu doing an arrest, find somebody and arrest them. So when you're at Yuendamu station, you've carried out your AR-15. You personally have taken an AR-15. You've chosen to do that when you're back at Alice Springs station, and you know that at least one other person has, Constable Hawkins.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the status of your knowledge hasn't significantly changed from when you left Alice Springs station to when you leave Yuendamu station to head out to find Kumanjayi Walker, correct?
Correct.
So why did you not take the AR-15 with you when you left Yuendamu station?
Because at that point, in my mind, it wasn't required from my perspective.
But what has changed? It sounded like, from what you answered already, it was required when you left Alice Springs. It might be required.
No, I took it just in case the situation escalated.
All right. So you didn't take it for the purposes of going to find and arrest Kumanjayi Walker. When you left Alice Springs, you did not take the AR-15 for the purpose of going to find and arrest Kumanjayi Walker. Is that correct?
That's right.
You took it in case something unexpected happened, and it would be there in the vehicle or in the station safe.
Correct.
And that's why you didn't take it with you when you left Yuendamu station to go to house 577.
Correct.
Correct? But you'll be aware, as everyone in this room is aware,
That-
that one of the other police officers did take
Yes.
an AR-15. Do you know why that was done?
The only thing, like I think I said yesterday, someone asked me, why he took that, and the only thing, a logical reason I could think of was from a point of view that if let's say anyone ran out with a weapon at a police officer and they were stumbling back, struggling to get Glock out, fell over, then that would be something you could engage with, which is probably safer than a Glock over a longer distance because of the accuracy. So to protect life
But you
in
didn't
that
need
sense.
to take one for that reason.
No, I didn't know.
And I know it's uncomfortable speaking against other police officers in the witness box, but you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, that nobody needed to take an AR-15 on that exercise when you left the Yuendamu station? That's plainly right, isn't it?
I don't know. You'd have to ask that officer why he took it to clarify.
I know you don't want to give evidence which might embarrass another officer. In your judgment, with your experience, you didn't need one, did you?
From what we dealt with, it wasn't needed in that moment. No.
You didn't even need a Kevlar vest. You didn't take a Kevlar vest with you on when you were going out to find Kumanjayi Walker, did you?
No, I did not.
And a Kevlar vest is something that you wear which provides a lot of protection in the case of weapons being used against you. Yep.
Yeah, it covers your torso. Yeah.
Yep. And you didn't take a taser with you?
Nope.
You didn't take a helmet?
Nope.
No taser, no helmet, no R-15, but you were content to go out and do the job that you thought needed to be done. Correct?
Correct.
Which is the same sort of attitude, and I'm talking about you only, not the other officers. It's the same sort of attitude that you would employ if you were in Alice Springs going out to do a similar kind of operation. you wouldn't take an AR-15. If you were given this job to go up to a suburb in Alice Springs for an arrest, you wouldn't have taken an AR-15.
Well, the policies around it's changed since that
Go
time.
back to that time.
No, you wouldn't. Not unless they were in possession of a weapon. You know, like the job was up that high risk.
Based on
But
the information you had and on the type of operation it was, you wouldn't have taken AR-15 if you're in Alice Springs. Correct?
correct.
And you applied the same attitude for yourself in Yinderman.
Yeah, well, I was on the youth engagement, so we rode around on push
I'm
bikes.
not talking about all
And
that.
so
I'm talking about the decisions
the
you
same.
made at the time in Yinderman, and if you're making the same kind of decision or the same kind of arrest in Alice Springs at that time, you would not have taken an AR-15, correct?
Correct.
And if you're in Alice Springs at that time for the same kind of arrest, none of your team would have taken an AR-15, is that correct?
You'd have to ask
At
them.
that time. So they could have, in terms of policy, they could have.
You wouldn't do it unless it was deemed to be a high risk.
Right. Yesterday
Probably.
and today, you've said the words effectively, things have changed with regard to the use of AR-15s. Can you just explain that to us?
Just around taking it when it's in possession, or well, visible to members of the public. So when the weapon is visible to members of the public, or potentially be seen, there's a requirement to put in a use of force.
Prior to taking the weapon out.
So I'll give you an example. So the back of the police station here in Alice Springs, the car park's visible, the vehicles are visible from members of the public from outside of the boundary of the police station. Now, if I was to walk out of the back of the police station with the AR-15 carrying it in my hands to the vehicle, technically that's visible to the public, so I would be required to submit a use of force.
Before or after?
Or at the end of that particular job, or by the end of the day, it's a requirement by the end of shift, yeah.
And as most, if not everyone in the room knows, at the end of the shift, if there's a use of force has occurred, for instance, if you've been in a violent incident, you have to fill out a form called a use of force case note entry.
Correct.
And I'm not. So if someone swung punches at you and you blocked the punches, brought the person to the ground, they got an injury, that necessitates a whole lot of paperwork, the use of force entry.
Yeah, applied any level of force, yeah.
Any level of force, and there are many others. Unleashing a dog to bite somebody is another one, isn't it?
I think so. I'm not a dog handler, but I think that is correct, yeah.
So when did this change? Because it may have some significance for what we're doing. In 2019 November, that obviously wasn't the rule, that you had to submit a use of force case note entry if you were displaying an AR-15 in public. When did that change?
I don't know the date when that changed.
Just roughly.
I can't tell you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sure we could probably find out,
I'm
but
sure.
yeah.
Someone's probably sending a message already, but was it explained to you why the rules changed about displaying AR-15s in public?
No, it was not.
What's the purpose of the rule as you understand it? I might summarise it just to be quicker. Is the idea that the public don't have to see police holding AR-15s, if that can be avoided?
Probably just gets reviewed as to why. I didn't implement the policy around that, so
All right, we'll leave it.
yeah.
Yesterday and today you used an example which I must say I find a bit troubling as to why you might need an AR-15 in an emergency situation. Yesterday and today you've given the example that perhaps an officer is stumbling and someone is charging at them and you need to use your AR-15 to protect the officer. Right, summarise that fairly?
Yeah.
So you're anticipating that you're significantly further away than 4 metres.
Correct.
A well-trained shooter, such as yourself using a Glock, could hit a person at approximately 20-25 metres. That's about the outer range of what you'd be confident with, is that right?
I wouldn't be able to shoot that person or, that target, for example, within a short space of time from that distance accurately. That would take time to, aim and that sort of stuff.
That's
So
true with any weapon.
But from 4 metres,
Well, it's just point and shoot. We all get that.
so that's what I'm referring to. So
Yeah. But
where an AR-15 has a scope on it.
if there's an officer over there and I'm just pointing in the distance who stumbled and there's someone running at them, for you to pull out an AR-15, lift it up from, you usually hold it with two hands, don't you?
That's right. Usually there's a sling on it as well.
It has an AR-15 sling and you hold it with two hands as a matter of safety. And
Control the weapon. Yeah.
Yeah. You would never walk around just hanging onto it with one hand, nonchalantly swinging it around, would you? Do you ever walk around with an AR-15 with one hand holding the weapon?
Depends on where you are. Like if you ran the range, for example, in between shooting, but you not put the weapon down, you would just sling it down. You'd hold it with your left hand, for example, because I'm right-handed, and then I would go and do my other tasks if I need
Or
to.
if you're walking through a community, through houses with people, women and children.
You would keep it down in the guard position generally,
Guard position means both hands.
but you're pointing down. Yeah.
Pointing down with both hands.
Correct.
Understand what I'm saying? Two hands, not one.
Yeah.
You don't walk around amidst women and children holding a rifle, an AR-15 with one hand.
Generally not.
There's no good reason for that. Correct? That you can think of.
That I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah. So this example that you're using, IRT officers go and do a lot of training at the range, extra training, and you might not have done it all, but you've done a fair bit, correct?
Correct.
And when you're doing it at the range, you've got a target down the range, 200 metres probably, or something like that, is that correct?
No, not that far. Usually we only practice.
Talking about the AR-15,
Yeah, we only usually practice with that weapon out to about maybe 12 metres or something.
An AR-15 out to 12 metres.
When we're doing the drills with IRT back in a few years ago,
Yep.
now there's a requirement to do both a 5 metre and a 25 metre shoot.
With an AR-15.
Correct.
All right. So it's plain that using a Glock at 5 metres requires no more skill than any police officer would have. And you agree with that?
Can you say that again, please?
Using a Glock at 5 metres is pretty basic talent, isn't it? You don't have to be specialist trained to do that.
It does require some training.
Yeah, you've got training, but everyone in the police force who's trained with a Glock has got training. They can use it for a 5 metre shoot. You agree with that?
To be operational, yes. That
Yeah. In fact, is that the test? Is 5 metres the test?
4 it is,
Okay.
and 12.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is, and I just want to be blunt with you, I think that the example you used, which you made on the run yesterday, I'm not criticising for it, no one wants to be in the witness box being asked to create examples, but it's a kind of fantastical example, isn't it? If there's a police officer who's stumbled and there's another person running at the police officer, for someone to bring up an AR-15 to their eyes, sight it, take off the safety and hit a running target requires a great deal of skill, doesn't it?
It requires a level of skill, yeah.
Yeah. And I've read through everything I can on IRT, trained to hit running targets with AR-15s.
No.
Yeah. So the example that you gave is completely outside the training that we're talking about. I mean, you personally may be able to do it, but you don't expect it of your colleagues as a matter of certification and training, do you?
I expect them to be able to, do their best to
Sure.
protect human life, but
You expect them to be able to hit a static target at certain distances, but you don't expect them to be able to hit a running target with an AR-15.
well, it's not part of the training,
So the
but
example that you gave yesterday, I'm just trying to be quick, so thank you for the comment, Mr. Edwards. If I'm going too fast, make sure you stop me, all right? And that's before you, in a community such as Union, that's before you ask the question of who else might be in the line of danger if I'm moving an AR-15 across, 45 or 90 degree arc at high speed while someone's running 5 to 10 metres to an officer. You've got to assess every person in that distance up to a distance of at least 500 metres as to where the round might go. So it's not something you'd ever really do, is it?
we have to conduct that risk assessment to ensure that, you're within a safe direction.
Yeah.
That was just a hypothetical situation.
I'm not
So-
criticising you for making a hypothetical under pressure in the witness box. I'm just saying it doesn't withstand much analysis, does it?
Or maybe that person is running in a straight line from your direction.
In
You know,
which case- in which case
and
what?
you're just putting the hypothetical that they're running sideways to me, but potentially maybe they're not. So I mean, it's just a hypothetical situation.
If they were
So
running in a straight line to a police officer and you were in the same straight line, you could not use your AR-15 because you run the risk of killing both the person and the officer.
that would be a risk, yes.
Very high risk, wouldn't it? Especially at 5 or 12 metres.
This is all the risk assessment you have to make
Yeah.
in the moment.
And while we're talking about risk assessment, and on this case, knowing what you knew when you left Alice Springs and knowing what you knew when you left Uniview Police Station, it was quite unrealistic to expect that you would have to shoot Kumanjayi Walker as he ran off and ran away. So if he was a fleeing target running into the bush, in an arrest situation,
Yep.
and that itself is not a particularly unusual circumstance, you'd agree with that, is it?
That's correct.
You would not raise your AR-15 to take him down and shoot him and kill him just because he was within range and it was a safe shot.
No, you would not.
Nothing in this whole scenario presents the likelihood or even the remote likelihood of that happening, does it?
No.
Just one quick final point, if I may. There's been a fair bit of talk about your, not necessarily in this court, but in the papers that we had and some of the answers you gave about your training in martial arts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've trained in martial arts for a significant period of your adult life.
Yeah, you've been on and off, yep.
More than 10 years training, I think you've said in evidence in the past, correct?
Correct.
And you're trained in Wing Chun Kung Fu, correct?
A little bit, yep.
Jiu-Jitsu?
Yep.
And Aikido.
Yep.
So
And
martial
the
arts-
Aboriginal martial art,
and
Ramajeri.
Aboriginal martial art, which I don't know anything about. Is it a close quarter martial art?
Yep.
So like the others, Aikido is all about using someone else's energy to restrain them. Yeah?
Yep.
Jiu-Jitsu is particularly known for its specialist holds and restraining people. And Wing Chun Kung Fu is managing attacking at a very close combat. So all of those are very well suited for the sort of work you might have to do in a hands-on physical arrest.
Yep. But unlike, like I said yesterday, you can't use techniques that are not taught within the police. So you have to, but some of them are pretty much very similar in the sense. So you can't step out the boundaries of what you get taught.
Sure, because within the martial arts there are the ones that we just discussed, there are moves you can do which are unacceptably dangerous and potentially lethal.
Of course.
But within the range of your police work, Dr. Dwyer took you to, and I won't play the video either, it's too distressing, but at the moment in which the shooting occurred, you've come in behind Mr. Walker.
Yeah.
You've got one arm over him and you're in the process of restraining him.
Yeah.
You're taking him down to the ground.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
And to summarise a lot of evidence, you're bigger, you're heavier, you've got a lot of skill and you're behind him, which gives you all of the advantages. Correct?
Correct.
In addition to your many years of training. When you bring him down, you've got him, you're in the process of containing him and trapping him, correct?
Correct.
If shots had not been fired, you would have been confident that you would nevertheless have him contained and restrained within a second or so.
That's a hypothetical situation. It's hard to determine what would have happened because it didn't happen like that.
Well, your previous summary of it in another court was he wasn't going anywhere.
After he was on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you put him on the ground.
Yep. That's after he was already shot once. Yep.
But he's on. But you were putting him on the ground anyway.
Well, hopefully that would have happened. Yep.
And it may be hypothetical, you're not prepared to answer, but if he hadn't been shot, the first shot, are you able to say that you would confidently have got him on the ground and restrained him in the next second or two anyway?
I can't say. Yeah. That was what my goal was after I determined that he had some sort of weapon in his right hand. But yeah, but that was, it's hard to say what would have happened. You know, maybe that was that determining factor after the first shot was fired as to my ability to get him down. I don't know. Because as you know or have heard in the past, adrenaline makes people extraordinarily strong. There's a report of an elderly lady, 70 years old, threw a security guard across the room, which she's a lot smaller than him. So.
But precisely because of what you said, it's unknowable now whether the first shot in fact had any effect on the energy being expended by Mr. Walker.
We're not sure yet.
Yeah. All right. Just going back finally to the police station, just to clarify something. You said you were walking around the police station with Mr. Hawkins at the end of the day. Pardon me, after the shooting, back at the police station, into the next day, you're doing patrolling. Have I understood that correctly?
I think this was after the we'd been to the airstrip the first time and come back.
Yep.
And then there was other officers inside. So before that, we were sort of stationed inside the police station. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So now I'm just clarifying this business about patrolling. As I understood the evidence that you gave yesterday, you said briefly yesterday that you spoke with Mr. Hawkins briefly about the incident at the House 511. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is when, so we were having a conversation while we were walking around the rear of the police compound. Yeah.
Okay. Can you just tell us what was said about the incident at 511 when you were in that walk?
I think I said it yesterday, but I think it was, this is what I experienced and explained my interaction, and then he explained where he was outside the house. He heard a gunshot come to the doorway and then saw Zach come over the top, what he believed to be coming over the top, and fire 2 more shots. That's basically, you know, the gist of what we were talking about. So different viewpoints and yeah.
Well, what's the difference? What's the different viewpoint? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, it's also more of your mental health. So this is what you're experiencing, you know, this emotional part of your brain, and so you speak about it. So it responds to your logical part of your brain. So it helps cope with the stress.
What did you say to Mr. Hawkins about the incident?
Just spoke about where I was. This is where I was, and then as we were arresting him, he moved off the wall. Zach disappeared, and then basically went through the motion. When I initially didn't think it was a gunshot until I saw the blood, and then realised that he had been shot, and you know, that sort of stuff. So we're just going through a little bit about that, what happened in that room. Yeah, I can't remember specifics because it was such a long time ago, but yeah, that's basically what we was kind of like discussing.
Did either of you express an opinion about the shooting happening at all?
I can't recall.
Send the time, Your Honour.
How many hands-on arrests approximately have you done?
I can't say for sure, Your Honour.
10s, 20s, 50?
Maybe like between 20 and 50, maybe.
And how many people have got away?
Not many, because I can run, okay?
Mr Edwardson,
Thank you, Ron. Just grab a lecture if I may.
sure, are you okay to do it from that position or would you like to?
Yeah. No, I'm good. Right. Good, you're right. Thank you. I want to start, if I can, just by running through the training that you've had in terms of cultural competency and so on. And I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, so I'll give you a few dot points and key matters that were raised yesterday in your evidence. When you were in South Australia, you told Dr. Dwyer that you were trained in cultural competency in the context of being a South Australian police officer.
Correct.
You told us about how you developed a friendship with a neighbour, an Indigenous neighbour, and how he taught you what you call Ramanjeri arts. Martial arts, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yep.
And he became a very close, if not best friend, to you.
Correct.
And you trained regularly together.
Correct.
And he taught you a great deal, did he not, about cultural respect.
He did.
And that's something and a concept which you embraced
I did.
and have continued to embrace and build upon since becoming a police officer in the Northern Territory.
Correct.
As you told Dr. Dwyer, it was an extremely meaningful relationship.
Definitely. Yes.
You gave examples of cultural respect by saying that you show respect to country when you travel and working in another area.
Correct.
You said you ask permission to walk on their land.
Correct.
You said you seek out the elders of the area and it shows respect.
Correct.
And they tell you where you can and can't walk.
Correct.
They also explain, cultural areas, so you told us.
Correct.
And you also told us that they tell you stories and things.
Correct.
Now that was an understanding that you had and a rich, and I suggest, appreciation of, even before you became a Northern Territory police officer.
Correct.
So it would follow that when you started as a Northern Territory police officer, you had an intimate knowledge of the boundaries of mixing within the community and conducting yourself as a police officer.
Correct.
Now, as a police officer, both in South Australia and perhaps more relevantly in the Northern Territory, have you been exposed to criminal activity by members within the communities?
Yes, I have.
Can't hear me.
Just when you wander that way.
I do move around a bit. I'm sorry. I'll try. What I'm going to do is I'm going to swap. Is that better? I hope. All right. So, obviously, as a police officer, it's extremely important that you respect the community insofar as you're able when you're performing your duties as a police officer.
Correct.
But would it also follow that there are occasions where that sort of respect is simply not possible?
Definitely.
And that, of course, depends upon the circumstances.
Yeah, well, I mean, if someone's committing an offence, regardless if they're within the community, we've got a job to do, and we need to arrest them if in the last resort, if there's no other option.
Now, one of the issues that's become very live and important to the coroner, and something which, as I understand it, you were not aware of when you were deployed by Sergeant Frost at 7:05 p.m. with the other members of the IRT on the 9th of November 2019, was the possibility that Kumanjayi Walker might be attending a funeral. You didn't know that at that time.
No, I did not.
Nor did you know, nor did she brief you on the fact that he'd been given multiple opportunities to surrender himself through senior members of the community.
No, I was not.
You were aware, however, as I understand it, from the initial briefing that occurred with Sergeant McCormack, I think it was.
Yes.
You were aware that the mission on this occasion was to find him and arrest him.
Correct.
At that point in time, you knew that there was a warrant out for his arrest.
Yes.
You knew that he was to be also charged for subsequent offending arising from what we've been calling the Axe incident.
That's correct.
And you had seen that footage, that confronting footage, can I suggest, on video before you departed the Alice Springs police station and attended at Yuendamu.
That's correct, yeah.
At that stage, you weren't aware of his prior criminal history.
No, I was not.
You didn't know, for example, the extent to which he might have committed violent acts or offences.
No.
So all you really knew was there's a warrant for his arrest You knew about the axe incident, but it was the axe incident which informed you, as I understand your evidence yesterday, that he was a flight risk in the sense that he was likely to decamp.
Yes.
There was a real possibility that if given the opportunity, he might arm himself with a lethal weapon.
That's correct.
And there was always the live possibility in those circumstances of him deploying that weapon if that situation arose.
Yes.
And so it's against that background that you departed ultimately at 7:05 p.m. with the other members of the IRT and Mr. Donaldson, who was the dog man.
Correct.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about a warrant and general orders. You understand what general orders are?
I do.
General orders are orders which are promulgated by the Commissioner of Police,
Correct.
and they require police to perform their duties in a particular way.
That's correct.
Are you familiar, and I'll show you a copy of this general order if I may. Oh, sorry. Your Honour, I've got a copy for you, Councillor Sisting, and a few copies of the others, if I can hand that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if one could be given to the witness. I want to direct your attention to General Order W1, which was gazetted or came into effect on the 1st of March 2003. And you'll see that it's a general order dealing specifically with warrants. You see that?
Number 3, is it, did you say?
No, I'm saying it's General Order W1.
Oh,
it's
yep.
called.
Yes.
Took effect from the 1st of March 2003, and it deals specifically with arrest pursuant to a warrant, amongst other things.
Correct.
And you'll see in paragraph 2.1, warrants of arrest are generally issued for the apprehension of persons accused or suspected of serious crimes.
Correct.
And a bit further down, or may issue a warrant for the defendant's apprehension in the first instance. In most cases of serious offences, a warrant will probably be issued at once. Understand that?
Yes.
And you understood you might not have read this and kept it by your bedside table, but you certainly understood that this general order existed.
Yes.
And you understood, didn't you, the importance of you complying with that general order, as you do with any other general order.
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to paragraph 9.1, please, of the general order. And you'll see that there's a heading, withholding execution. Do you see that?
Yes.
A member must not withhold execution of any warrant because of personal consideration for a defendant. Do you see that?
Yes.
That would apply, would it not, that general order, to Kumanjayi Walker in the circumstances of your deployment and arrest, because you knew that there was a warrant out for his arrest.
Yes.
Consistent with that general order, you were not to consider personal circumstances of him.
Correct.
You were to apprehend him as soon as you were able,
Yes.
and that's what you did on this occasion.
Yes.
Or attempted to do, I should say.
Yep.
All right, I want to take it a little bit further if I can. Yesterday, Mr. Bowe asked you some questions about sorry business, attending a funeral, showing respect and so on. And I think you gave an example of where you had been put in a position where you had to arrest an offender despite the fact that sorry business was ongoing.
Correct.
And you did that because the offender needed to be apprehended.
Yes.
And whilst there might be some cultural respect, sentiment and understanding, if not empathy, for members of the community in circumstances of sorry business, sometimes police business must override that consideration.
Correct.
For example, as this general order makes absolutely plain, personal circumstances of a defendant are not to be considered when you're arresting a person
It's not
as a
personal circumstances, it's personal
consideration. Sorry, my apologies. Personal
for a
consideration.
defendant, which I think is a slightly different
You're
concept.
quite right, Your Honour. Personal consideration of a defendant. In other words, his desire, for example, to attend a funeral would not override your obligation, as you understand this general order, to arrest him.
Correct.
All right. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about the fluid nature and what we've called risk assessment. You remember you were asked a series of questions about risk assessment and whether risk assessment had been conducted,
Correct.
and you said that you have to be fluid.
Yes.
Now, we know that the arrest plan which was ultimately sent to you by email, but which you never cited until many months later, was never handed to you by Sergeant Frost at the Yuendamu police station.
That's correct.
Nor did she specifically bring it to your attention in the 8 or 9 minutes that you were present at the police station.
Correct.
And as I understand your evidence, there was no discussion at all or direction by her that he, that is Kumanjayi Walker, was not to be arrested until 5 a.m. in the morning, following morning.
No, it wasn't, no.
You knew nothing about being deployed or not being deployed until 11 p.m. that night.
No, I knew nothing of that, no.
What you did know, and the extent to which you knew it, was that Sergeant Frost was the officer in charge of the Yuendamu police station.
Correct.
She was effectively your senior officer,
She was.
and she was the person that ultimately deployed the 4 members of the ART, including yourself and the dog handler Donaldson.
Correct.
Now, the mission was to arrest Kumanjayi Walker. You knew that if you came upon him, not only consistent with his general order, but also by virtue of the warrant for apprehension and what you'd been told by McCormack and in turn Frost, that he was to be arrested and that's what you were going to do.
Yes.
It's clear, isn't it, that at least when you departed with the other members, you had no idea where Kumanjayi Walker was in fact going to be.
No.
What you did know was that the last time he'd been seen was at house 577.
Yep. Hence that's why we went there first.
That's
Yep.
right. And that's where the axe incident occurred.
Correct.
And so you went with the other members directly to that location.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit more generally, if I can, about policing. Obviously, if you've got a flight risk, and he fell into that category because of what had happened, he'd run off and decamped before, but it doesn't have to be him, it could be anybody. Covert activity, the element of surprise might be important.
Yes.
As soon as you as a police officer in full uniform, let alone with some members holding long arms, go into the community, inevitably it's going to run through the community like wildfire.
Yes.
And so as a police officer with some experience in training, you would understand that as soon as you are identified as police officers, let alone talking to members of the community, saying, we want to arrest, or we're here to arrest Kumanjayi Walker, there's a real chance that he'd be tipped off,
Yes.
that he might flee, and the opportunity's lost.
Yes.
So that's an example, isn't it not, of you having to be fluid in assessing at all relevant times intelligence or information that comes to the police officers responsible for this arrest.
Yes, 100%.
What do you understand by intelligence gathering?
Speaking to people, obtaining information is pertinent to our mission.
Intelligence gathering is sort of 101 policing, is it not?
It is.
And it doesn't matter whether you're in the community dealing with Indigenous members or whether you're dealing with somebody else in Alice Springs. It's the same process.
Yes.
You talk to people to try and get a lead, particularly if you're going to try and arrest somebody and you don't know where they are.
Correct.
And that's what happened here, isn't it?
It was.
You go effectively to house 577, and what we now know, to cut to the chase, is that information was provided to police that you'd missed him only by minutes,
Yep.
and that he was likely to be at 2 other houses, one of which we now know was house 511.
Yep.
So armed with that intelligence, which had been gathered by police, consistent with your training, you then moved to the next location.
We did.
Now, risk assessment, you said we conduct a risk assessment on an ongoing basis. And much has been made, for example, of long arms, what their capability is, all that sort of thing. Every arrest situation turns on its own facts, does it not?
It does.
And indeed, it may be, and as it happened in this particular case, you're in very close proximity to Kumanjayi Walker when he produces a concealed, potentially lethal weapon.
Yes, that's right.
A pair of surgical scissors.
Yes.
A weapon that fell within your training as being an edged weapon.
Correct.
Within your training, potentially lethal.
Definitely.
Your training tells you also that you are entitled to protect yourself in those circumstances.
Correct.
Now, you were asked a series of questions a moment ago about what may or may not have happened after the first shot and whether you could have, as it were, apprehended him or controlled him without the necessity, for example, of the second and third shots. That was, in effect, what was being put to you. And your response was, well, look, that's hypothetical. And that must be so, must it not?
Correct.
Because what we do know is that when you're grappling with Kumanjayi Walker on that bed, he was armed with a pair of scissors.
He was.
He was resisting at all relevant times.
Yes.
He was deploying the scissors, as we now know.
Yes.
And we also know that even after the second and third shots, he continued to resist.
Yes.
And you told him to stop mucking around, or even more inflammatory, colourful language than that.
Yes.
And it actually took quite some time, even after the second and third shots, before you were able to restrain him.
To handcuff him in the... Yep.
Handcuff him and remove the scissors from his hands.
Correct.
Again, consistent entirely with your training.
Correct.
In other words, you have to secure him, you have to handcuff him, you have to remove the weapon before anything further can be done.
Correct.
Right. Now, moving back to cultural sensitivity and your understanding of it, you have told us that there's a way in which you speak to members of the community out of respect.
Yes.
And leaving aside the remark that you made about the maybe somebody shouldn't be deploying an axe, that flippant, if I can suggest, remark that should never have been made,
Yes.
which you retracted and apologised for. Leaving that aside, did you ever see any member of the recruit training unit on that day, when in the community, say or do anything which you regarded as being culturally insensitive?
Do you mean the IRT members?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, it's Air Force. My apologies.
Yes.
The IRT. No.
No.
I want to ask you a few questions about Zachary Rolfe. At any stage, when you were in his presence, did you see or hear him say or do anything which appeared to be racially motivated?
No, I did not.
Did you see him say or do anything which was consistent with a lack of respect to members of the community?
No, it was quite the opposite, actually.
When you say it was quite the opposite, what do you mean?
He was polite, courteous, spoke to people with respect as you would want a police officer to speak to your family or, yeah.
At any time, did you see, have you ever heard him, leaving aside this particular day, say or do anything which suggested that he had some particular racial vendetta to members of the Indigenous community?
No, nothing at all.
Or, in fact, any of the other members of the IRT?
No.
I want to return now, if I can, to the occasion where you were in the, is it Alpara?
Alpara, yes.
You told us that after the committee, at that stage, I think you were working in that community.
Correct.
And it's a community which is approximately 250 kilometres northeast of Alice Springs.
Correct.
It's a remote community.
It is.
Does it have similar sort of, I'll start again. Is the only occasion that you'd been to Yuwindamu the occasion of the shooting?
I went there one other time, but only to the airstrip, so I hadn't actually been into the community.
So are we to understand that you'd had very limited, if not zero, direct involvement with members of the Yuwindamu community?
Correct.
Are there, we can understand, and indeed the coroner can understand, if she doesn't already, are there any parallels that one can draw between the Yuwindamu community and, say, the Alpara community?
Yeah, there's some people within, we'll call it Utopia homeland. There are people there that are from the Warlpiri background. So they're Warlpiri people, direct links to people in Yuwindamu.
Right.
So there are people there from that area, yeah.
Do both communities, and again, please, if you don't know about the Yuwindamu community, say, but certainly from the Alpara community, are there problems within the community from time to time?
Yes.
Issues of violence?
Yes.
Domestic violence?
Yes.
Weapons?
Yes.
Police officers potentially put at risk?
Yes.
Is that a quite frequent occurrence, or an occurrence that police have to be regularly aware of?
Yes.
Now, you chose, on the occasion of the 9th of November 2019 to not take with you one of the long-arm weapons?
From the police
From the
station,
police
yes. Yes.
And you said that, and you acknowledged you didn't have a vest and you didn't have a taser, but you certainly had your Glock, didn't you?
I did.
Now again, one of the live issues for the consideration in this, of the coroner in this inquest, is whether police should have weapons, bear weapons, in communities, in Indigenous communities. And we know now that, unlike perhaps some police officers, you have a much wider and extended empathy, understanding of cultural sensitivities.
Yes.
And you've worked in the communities for some time, and you love, for example, working at Alpara.
Yes.
I ask you this then, in those circumstances, what's your view on police officers carrying a Glock, for example, whilst in the community?
Well, I think that's part of our kit. And I, whilst out there in Alpara, there was a large disturbance where I had to draw my firearm at several members of the community to stop them from viciously assaulting someone with a weapon.
Mm-hmm. And when did that happen?
That would have been the sports carnival in Alpara last year.
So would it be fair to say that it is really quite unrealistic to think that police could police within the community without having a weapon when and if necessary?
Yes.
So is it your opinion, and you're not just a police officer, you're now a weapons instructor, are you not?
I am.
Is it your opinion that that is an essential part of the kit
Definitely.
of a police officer,
Yes.
regardless of whether the policing is within the Indigenous community?
Yes, that's correct.
In other words, it's part and parcel of policing day in, day out, wherever you might be working.
That is correct.
Have you ever experienced, as a police officer in the Northern Territory, the notion that the use of force or the motivation for the use of force was driven by some sort of racial motivation?
No.
Is that a sentiment that you've ever experienced?
No.
I want to ask you a little bit about, again, after the committal, you've told us that you went into Para and you decided that you would engage with the community, given that you had been one of the participants involved in the tragic death of Kumanjayi Walker.
Yes.
And so they knew, or you told them, that you were involved in that incident,
Yes.
and you were seeking to give them an understanding of how and why it happened.
Yes.
So you must have told them about the circumstances that led up to the shooting incident itself.
Yes.
For example, otherwise I wouldn't understand the complexity of it, are we to understand that you would have conveyed what you knew, namely, I'll start with the axe incident.
Yes, that was something I explained to them.
And while I'm on the axe incident, and of course every police officer is different, and you were very careful to say, well, you know, I was expressing my opinion having looked at the video. What was the actual opinion that you expressed when you first saw that axe incident?
I was surprised that the members didn't use their firearm.
When you say use their firearm, potentially discharge it.
Potentially, yes.
And that would have been consistent with the training that you've received.
Yes.
All right. Now back to Alpara. At this meeting, you told the members of the community about the axe incident,
Yes.
presumably so that you could convey to them why there was not only a warrant for his apprehension, but also why he was going to be charged with this very serious offence.
Yes.
Did you also convey that he was very lucky that he wasn't shot on that occasion?
Yes, I did.
And so they understood that too?
They understood the seriousness of the incident, yes.
And how was that received by the community? That is, when you were explaining to them what happened.
Well, during the concept, they were quiet and waited till I'd finished my story, the whole thing. And then they deliberated about what action.
Sorry, I'll come to that. First of all, can you tell us how many were present?
There was 2 occasions, so I did 2 meetings. So the first one, there would have been maybe 100, and there would have been maybe 150 or something at the second time. Yeah.
And where was it held?
So the first one was the Alpara council office, and the second time was in the basketball court within in Bloodowich community.
Were there any other police officers present?
The second one there was. I can't recall the first time. Yeah.
How did you get it out to the community that that's what you were going to do, and why?
Yep. I spoke to. I believe they were having a meeting in Alpara anyway, a council meeting. So I asked if I could talk. I want to tell my story, what happened, and they gave me an opportunity. And then the second time, I asked for a community meeting, speaking to the elders, and they gathered everyone down to the basketball court.
Out of interest, what were you wearing? Were you in uniform?
I was in my uniform, yes.
Did you have your Glock?
I did.
And you had your Glock with you when you were giving this
Correct.
discussion?
Yes.
Have a microphone?
No.
All right. Anyway, you told us how you'd explained to them, was this at the first meeting, the what I call the axe incident,
Yes.
the warrant of apprehension,
Yes.
the fact that he was going to be charged with 2 further offences arising from that incident?
Yes.
And we know, and it's well documented, that of course, unbeknown to you and Constable Rolfe, Kumanjayi Walker had secreted in his pocket this pair of scissors, which he deployed initially, stabbed Rolfe,
Yes.
and then was seeking to deploy it against you. That's the background to the whole case.
Yes.
What did you say to the members of the community about the circumstances of this shooting, the catalyst for it, how it happened?
Basically, I walked through the moment where I engaged with him in the. This is in the house. I engaged with him in there. Was asking his name. Just walked through the whole process. He gave me a different name, and then
That was Vernon Dixon, wasn't it?
Vernon Dixon, correct?
Which was a false name, of course.
Correct. And then Zach to move him over to the wall, where he used a phone to gather a likeness picture. And then after he was, we established that this was him. Zach informed me he was under arrest. Put your hands behind your back. A struggle ensued, and then Zach disengaged, and that was the moment that he was stabbed in the shoulder with the scissors. And then basically walked through the process. I don't know if you want me to say.
No, we don't need to go through
Yeah.
the whole process again.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to understand, and I want hopefully the coroner to understand, is did you take these members of the community in through, almost frame by frame if you like?
I did, and also after the fact, back at the police station when we were rendering first aid, and through that process as well.
Yes. We'll adjourn to the